Hello everybody, it's Jess. I thought it would be cool to share my process on how I fill 2 pages in my sketchbook, so feel free to grab yours and let's get started. If you've been watching my channel, you guys know that I love working in my sketchbook. I try my best to spend every day in it. I've been doing many art challenges, and I've been focusing on specific features, so today I just wanted to sit down in my sketchbook and actually focus on the full figure. So I'm going to be creating a sketchbook spread, and I'll show you guys the full process. I realized that I haven't actually drawn people in a really long time, specifically the full figure, and I wanted to go back to just using a pencil and creating some sketches in the spread. And going into this sketchbook page, I had absolutely no plan, so I'm going to actually play around with whatever comes to mind as I'm going along. I always like to think of my sketchbook as a place to have fun, a place to experiment, and just see what I can come up with in the moment. And it's always interesting to see how you start drawing and different ideas begin to pop in your head just from one line or the other. So as I was drawing this girl, I really wanted to focus in on her shape and kind of play with the perspective. And as I begin to add the other figures, I wanted to play around with size as well. I always start my sketches with a really light mark, and then I add in some values and actually change the variety of the way that I put the pressure on the pencil. This way you're creating a lot of movement and diversity in your pencil marks, and as you're bringing your sketch to life, it gives it a really nice touch. So I like to be selective in the areas that I add a little bit more pressure. Usually those areas are the places where I see the most shadows, and sometimes, basically most of the time, intuitively where I feel like putting them. And perhaps that develops as you practice more and keep sketching and experimenting with your own work. I always get asked on how I reached a level of drawing, but really it's just putting in the time and being passionate about what you do. Also challenging yourself and not giving up. But as I was finishing the sketch of this girl, I had the idea of putting in some figures behind her and next to her and having a whole kind of composition, maybe where they're standing in the clouds, I don't know. So let's see what we can develop from that idea. I get many comments and messages where people are actually confused on what to draw and how to get started. But honestly, once you actually get started, ideas begin flowing in and you will see how you're able to develop things just from the little sketch that you started with. Maybe sometimes doodles get you going, or maybe sometimes just looking at a photo outside your window or even in your workspace, you will be inspired to draw. In today's sketch, I really wanted to draw some people, and I actually wanted to create some variety in the kind of clothing that they have. So I'm actually adding in the clouds, since I had the idea of the people kind of standing in the clouds and I wanted to have a lot of movement. So I'm adding little elements into my sketchbook spread to get that in. I also wanted to play around with perspective, so here I'm taking my blending stump and adding in this silhouetted figure right behind sitting in the clouds. I wanted to have different sizes of the proportions and kind of playing with perspective, so I'm adding in a smaller figure kind of dozing off and looking up into the sky, while the other larger figures will stand forward. Now, a little note on perspective: whenever you're drawing specifically people or objects, if you place certain objects behind, it really creates a depth in your work, and it's a great way to show some atmospheric perspective in your compositions. And I'm always constantly thinking about composition, so you guys know that that is very, very much a key for me. Now, the figures that I was drawing earlier were very much standing and kind of chilling in that spot, so I really wanted to create a movement in the piece, so I added a person jumping up in the clouds, and I ended up changing the face to look down with a hair flying around and ribbons. You guys know I love drawing ribbons. I feel like they're a great way and a great element to add for some flow in my compositions. So at this point and stage in the sketchbook spread, I really had the idea kind of in my head, and I was making sure I can bring it to life. And I still go around with the process where I add a very light sketch and place the figure, and then I add the other elements. Like I wanted to have a sun in the back and the rays coming around and kind of bringing the composition together. And I also like to make sure I'm standing up while I'm sketching to make sure I see the full composition from afar, and this way you can see where it needs some elements and kind of a way to balance out the work. I am all about balance, and I always want to make sure that the elements are sort of working all together. Even if I'm doing some simple sketches, I always think about compositions and how everything is balanced as one. And after I have drawn the figure, I always like to go back in and adjust the lines and the pressure and the variety of the line work that I included to make sure that everything is nice and clean, crisp, and concise. It also felt really good to get back into sketching with a pencil and really working out with some graphite. I actually recently got this mechanical pencil and it's really nice to work with. It's a very smooth draw and I'm really able to get some great variety in line work with this lead. So throughout the sketchbook spread, I'm alternating between the mechanical pencil and my black wing pencils, which you guys know I love so much. Pencils are great because you can actually create some shading and then use a kneadable eraser or any eraser to erase out the highlights. And I made sure I decided on a specific light source to make sure I have that really nice deep shadows and also those midtones as well as the highlights. That is the biggest tip for sketches and creating a more realistic feel and depth in your work. Make sure you have a great light source and you're sticking to it. Make sure you have your shadows, midtones, and those highlights. And as I'm finishing the last figures, I kind of wanted all of them to be interacting. So here I had these two kind of like looking at each other. And this last figure I drew on the bottom right, since I felt that it was a little bit empty down there, I wanted to create a girl kind of sitting on steps, like dreaming and listening to music, because that's exactly what I was doing in the moment. I had my music on and I was kind of like zoning out and sketching. So I really liked the way that this little sketch came out on the bottom right. And my cat was beside me, so I decided to add a little cat kind of sitting in her arms. So that's that little guy sitting in there. And of course, a cityscape in the background. So I had this, honestly, started off just drawing some figures, but then immediately had these ideas and sort of like a flow going. So here's how I developed that. As you guys can also see, I added this big sun and like sunshine rays coming out through the whole composition, and the clouds, I ended up also using some atmospheric perspective and adding little tiny clouds in the background to show that it goes back in space. And as I saw the whole big picture coming together, I began to add little touch-ups and adjustments to all the lines and kind of values to my whole sketchbook composition. And I guess recently there have been elements that I have been more kind of inclined to draw. So I've been really liking to do the ribbons. I actually have many paintings where I've done kind of ribbons to show some flow. I love shading them and I think they're a great element to bring the eye around the whole piece. Think about what you love to draw and what you kind of are more inclined to doodle at times and bring that and develop that in your sketchbook. I like to say that everybody has their own unique ideas, so make sure that you're experimenting and kind of bringing things that are personal to you to life. I found that this was so much fun to sketch today. It ended up taking many hours, but it was definitely worth it, and I feel like I got some really cool ideas. I'm finishing up all the touch-ups, and now it's time to show you guys the finished sketch. I hope you guys enjoyed this sketchbook spread draw along video, and I hope you enjoyed the little tips that I've mentioned today. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me. I'm really happy with the way that this little figure came out and how there's a nice little flow going around the whole sketchbook spread. You guys know I love adding in those elements. Let me know in the comments below what is your favorite thing to draw in your sketchbook, I love staying in contact with you guys and reading all your comments, so be sure to leave one below. Don't forget to check out my website for new updates in the shop. Don't forget to stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!